While strolling through the bustling city, Barron Trump encounters a startling scene. His former Secret Service agent, once responsible for his safety, now homeless and battling to survive. This emotional reunion sparks an unforeseen chain of events that will leave you stunned. What does Barron do next? Watch to find out. The wind was biting as Barron Trump navigated the crowded streets of Washington, D.C. The city pulsed with energy, yet something felt amiss. He tightened his coat, his mind swirling with the weight of being the president's son. Just weeks after his father's historic second inauguration, he was still grappling with the intense security and public scrutiny that came with his new reality. But then, he froze. Across the street, huddled against a freezing brick wall, was a figure that made his breath catch. A frail man sat with his head down, his tattered coat barely shielding his shivering frame. His face was gaunt, his beard unkempt, and his hands covered in dirt. Barron's heart raced as recognition hit him like a bolt of lightning. It was Agent Daniel Carter. Barron had known Daniel since childhood. The man had been one of his most trusted Secret Service agents, always standing tall in a sharp black suit, ready to shield him from danger. Now, he was homeless. A lump formed in Barron's throat as he stepped forward, determined to get answers. After a moment's hesitation, he crossed the street, the noise of honking cars and city chatter fading into the background. He crouched beside the man. "Daniel," Barron whispered, his voice barely audible. The man flinched but didn't look up. Barron's heart ached at the sight. How had things come to this? "Daniel, it's me, Barron Trump." Slowly, the man lifted his head. His sunken eyes blinked in disbelief, and for a moment it seemed he didn't recognize Barron. Then his breath hitched. "Barron?" His voice cracked, barely audible. Barron nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The last time he had seen Daniel, the man had been strong and disciplined. Now, he looked broken. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes, and his frail hands trembled. I didn't want you to see me like this," Daniel stammered. Barron clenched his fists, his chest tightening. "How did this happen? Tell me everything," he said, his voice firm but gentle. Daniel looked away. Shame etched across his face. "I lost everything," he began, his voice trembling. "After I retired, my wife got sick. We spent everything trying to save her. The hospital bills drained me. When she passed away, I had nothing left." Barron's stomach churned. A man who had once protected the president's son was now fighting for survival. "I tried to find work," Daniel continued, his voice hoarse. "No one wanted to hire an old retired guard. I lost my home. My family stopped answering my calls. The government I served," his voice broke. "They forgot about me." Barron's jaw tightened. He couldn't believe it. This man had dedicated his life to protecting others, and now no one was protecting him. Daniel wiped his eyes. "I didn't want you to see me like this, Barron. You were just a kid when I watched over you. You were like a son to me." A lump formed in Barron's throat. "And you were like family to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Family doesn't abandon each other." Daniel looked at him, stunned. Barron had already made his decision. This wasn't the end of Daniel's story, it was just the beginning. Barron sat on the cold pavement beside Daniel, ignoring the stares of passers-by. His heart was heavy. This man had once walked beside him in the White House halls, keeping him safe from harm. Now, he was invisible to the world. Barron took a deep breath, pushing down the emotions swelling in his chest. "Daniel, you protected me for years. You never let anything happen to me. How could I walk away now and leave you like this?" The old man wiped his eyes with trembling hands. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Barron interrupted, his voice firm. "You saved me. Now, it's my turn to save you." Tears spilled down Daniel's wrinkled cheeks. He had never expected this kind of kindness, especially not from the president's son. Barron pulled out his phone. "Come on, we're leaving." Daniel's eyes widened. "Leaving? Where?" Barron looked him straight in the eye. "Somewhere warm, somewhere safe, and I don't care what it takes. I'm making sure you never suffer like this again." For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he had lost long ago: hope. Barron knew bringing Daniel to the White House wasn't an option yet. The media would turn it into a spectacle. So he made a quick call. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Two of Barron's personal security guards stepped out, confused. Barron felt anger stir inside him. How many more Daniels were out there forgotten, abandoned, left to rot in the streets? He put down his cup. Daniel, what if we change that? The old man gave him a puzzled look. Change what? Barron's jaw tightened. Your story isn't over. You're not just some man on the streets. You were a protector, a warrior, and I won't let anyone forget that. Daniel looked at him, tears brimming in his eyes. Barron, why are you doing this for me? Barron reached across the table and gripped his hand. Because you did it for me first. Barron made a phone call that afternoon. Agent Whitmore, he said, when his father's chief of security answered. I need your help. There was a pause. Barron, what's wrong? I found Daniel Carter. The silence was deafening. Agent Whitmore had served alongside Daniel. He had seen him in his prime, standing tall, fearless. The thought of him homeless was too much to bear. Where is he? Whitmore asked, his voice thick with emotion. He's with me. Another pause. And what do you want me to do? Barron took a deep breath. I want to tell his story. I want people to know what happened to him. I want to make sure no one like him ever suffers again. There was a long silence before Whitmore sighed. You sound just like your father when he was younger. Barron smiled faintly. Then let's do this. The next day, Barron arranged a press conference at a private location. Only a select few reporters were invited, trusted sources who wouldn't twist the narrative. Daniel sat beside Barron, his hand shaking. Are you sure about this? Barron nodded. They need to hear you. The cameras rolled. Barron spoke first. This man, he said, pointing to Daniel, dedicated his life to protecting mine. He served this country, and yet when he needed help, no one was there. Gasps echoed through the room. Daniel swallowed hard and leaned forward. I was proud to serve, he said, his voice hoarse. But after I retired, after my wife passed, I lost everything. No pension, no support, just silence. Tears streamed down his face. I thought no one would ever see me again, but Barron did. Barron placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. This isn't just about Daniel. It's about the thousands like him, forgotten heroes, and I won't stay silent about it. The room fell silent. Reporters wiped their eyes. America was listening. This was just the beginning. The press conference footage spread like wildfire. Within hours, Daniel Carter's story was everywhere. News anchors debated it. Social media exploded with outrage and heartbreak. How could a former Secret Service agent be left homeless? Why isn't the government taking care of its veterans? Messages poured in from around the world. People wanted to help. Some offered money. Others demanded action from Congress. Veterans shared their own horror stories of being forgotten. Barron sat beside Daniel, watching it all unfold on the news. The elderly man wiped his eyes. I never thought anyone would care. Barron put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. They care because you matter, Daniel. Because you deserve better all along. A phone call interrupted them. Barron glanced at the screen. His father. Taking a deep breath, he answered. Dad. Donald Trump's voice was serious. Son, we need to talk. Meet me at the White House. Bring Daniel. Daniel's hands trembled. The White House? Barron gave him a reassuring smile. It's time. The ride to the White House was silent. Daniel stared out the window, his heart pounding. It had been years since he last stepped inside those gates back when he was a respected agent. Now, he felt like an imposter. The car pulled up, and Barron stepped out first. Secret Service agents eyed Daniel, but none stopped him. They knew who he was. Inside the Oval Office, President Donald Trump sat behind his desk. He looked up as Barron and Daniel entered. Trump's gaze softened when he saw the elderly man. Daniel Carter, it's been a long time. Daniel swallowed hard. Yes, sir. The president leaned back in his chair. I saw what my son did for you, and I saw the country's reaction. He exhaled. I won't lie to you. I didn't know this was happening to our veterans. But now I do, and I intend to fix it. Daniel's throat tightened. Sir, I never wanted pity. I just didn't want to be forgotten. Trump stood up and walked over. You won't be forgotten, Daniel. Not anymore. He turned to Barron. You did something important, son. You opened the nation's eyes. Barron nodded. Then let's make sure this never happens again. The next morning, Barron and Daniel sat side by side, watching as a new bill was announced on national television. The Carter Initiative program to support retired Secret Service agents and veterans who had fallen on hard times. Daniel covered his mouth, his shoulders shaking. They named it after me. Barron smiled. Because your story started this change. Sir, is everything okay? One asked. Barron nodded. This man is with me, no questions. Just drive us to my private suite. The guards exchanged glances but did as they were told. Daniel hesitated. Barron, I can't just step into a fancy car. Look at me. He gestured at his torn clothes, his shoes barely holding together. Barron shook his head. None of that matters to me. With great effort, Daniel climbed into the car. As they drove away, he stared out the window, watching the cold city fade behind him. Barron studied him, seeing the exhaustion, the pain, the years of suffering. This wasn't just about giving Daniel a home, it was about giving him his dignity back. The car pulled up to a luxurious high-rise building, Barron's private residence. Daniel's hands trembled as he stepped out. This is too much, Barron. I don't deserve this. Barron placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You deserve more than this, trust me. Inside, Daniel's eyes widened. The warm golden lights, the plush furniture, the smell of fresh food, it was overwhelming. After months of sleeping in the cold, it felt unreal. Barron led him to a large guest room with a freshly made bed, new clothes, and a private bathroom. Daniel stood frozen, his lips trembling. Then, he collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face as sobs racked his frail body. Barron knelt beside him, his own eyes misty. You're safe now, Barron whispered. Daniel looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. For the first time in years, he truly believed it. Daniel sat at the dining table, his hands shaking as he stared at the plate before him. A warm meal of steak, mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables, the kind of food he hadn't tasted in years. Barron sat across from him, watching as Daniel hesitated. Eat, Barron said softly. It's yours. Daniel picked up his fork with trembling fingers. The moment the first bite touched his tongue, tears welled up in his eyes. The flavors, the warmth, it brought back memories of the life he had lost. He chewed slowly, swallowing back emotions along with the food. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Barron leaned forward. You don't have to say anything. Just know you're not alone anymore. Daniel wiped his eyes. He had been invisible for so long, forgotten by the world. But here he was, sitting in the home of the president's son, being treated like family. For the first time in years, he felt human again. But deep inside, a fear still lingered. Was this too good to be true? That night, Daniel lay in a warm bed, staring at the ceiling. His body ached, his mind restless. The softness of the mattress should have brought him peace, but instead, it unearthed memories he had buried deep. The cold streets, the hunger, the nights spent shivering under a bridge, praying he wouldn't be attacked. Then, his wife, the beeping hospital machines. The moment her grip on his hand went limp, the moment his world collapsed. His chest tightened. He sat up, gasping for air. A soft knock on the door startled him. Daniel? Are you okay? It was Barron. Daniel wiped his face quickly. Yeah, just old memories. Barron stepped inside. You don't have to carry this alone. Daniel swallowed hard. You don't understand, Barron. Once you lose everything, the fear never leaves. Even now, I feel like this is all a dream. Barron sat beside him. Then I'll prove it's real, he said, his voice steady, his eyes filled with sincerity. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something other than fear. He felt safe. The next morning, Barron had a surprise waiting for Daniel. Come with me, Barron said, leading him outside. Daniel followed, confused. When they stepped into the garage, his breath hitched. A brand new wardrobe, fresh suits, shoes, a sleek black watch. Everything Daniel had lost this dignity. His identity was being handed back to him. Daniel's lips trembled as he ran a hand over one of the suits. Barron, this is too much. Barron shook his head. No, it's not enough. Daniel turned away, tears spilling down his face. He had spent years being overlooked, discarded. And now here was a young man, a boy he once protected, restoring his life. His knees buckled, and he fell to the floor, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you, he choked out. Barron knelt beside him. You protected me when I was a kid. Now, it's my turn. Daniel gripped Barron's hand, his heart overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he felt like a man again. Barron was sitting across from Daniel, sipping his morning coffee, when the elderly man suddenly stiffened. His eyes darted toward the television mounted on the wall. Barron turned to see what had caught his attention. A news segment flashed across the screen. A high-ranking official discussing the government's lack of support for retired servicemen. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. His voice, barely above a whisper, trembled. I gave my life to protect this country, and they threw me away.